This is the To Health With That Naturally Healthy in No Time podcast for big health topics taken in small bites. I'm your host, naturopathic Dr. Amy Newsel, and this is Season 1, all about the MTHFR mutation. This week, I want to talk about MTHFR and allergies or sensitivities, because let's face it, we've all got them. MTHFR and sensitivities are intimately linked, and for better or for worse, this is part of the MTHFR experience that makes having an MTHFR community so important. Let's face it, we need somebody to talk to who also can't use normal face cream and can't eat wheat without feeling like they're insane. Sensitivities come in 4 flavors, and we're only really beginning to understand why. First, let's talk about actual allergies. Allergies and atopic illness in general, which is things like asthma and migraines and skin sensitivities and interstitial cystitis and any other condition that's linked to over-responding to some irritant, are a huge problem for MTHFR folks. The reasons are multifaceted, but mostly it centers around histamine. Histamine is the main mediator of conventional allergic reactions. There are a few concrete links and also some logical connections. Number 1, folks with MTHFR issues often have higher resting levels of inflammation. So reactions that might stay under the radar for somebody with a lower level of inflammation suddenly becomes more tangible and symptomatic. Number 2, MTHFR folks often have a greater tendency towards histamine-related problems like interstitial cystitis, asthma, allergies, and atopic skin conditions, and folate metabolism is thought to be directly involved in this, although the research is only in the beginning phase. I could only find one relevant article, and that proposed a link between folate metabolism and the pathogenesis of interstitial cystitis. Number 3, MTHFR affects other pathways that are directly involved in histamine clearance, like the HNMT gene, which uses SAMe, which is a product of the healthy methylation cycle, but which can be deficient in MTHFR folks, as a cofactor. It's especially important in the nervous system. Number 4, with MTHFR, your conversion of BH2 to BH4 can be lower, which affects neurotransmitters, but also decreases nitric oxide production. Low nitric oxide is linked to increased mast cell degranulation and histamine flares, which means basically it takes less to trigger a pretty big response. The second type of sensitivity that we see a lot in MTHFR folks is food sensitivities. They've been on the increase in the last few years, hence the rise of the gluten-free industry and the implementation of food allergy labeling. Nobody really knows why this problem has become so pervasive, although I've heard theories about vaccine ingredients, genetic modification and selective breeding of crops, and also gut bacteria. More than likely, the truth is some combination of all of those things. One other factor exists, and that is, of course, genetics. Food sensitivities certainly seem more common within the MTHFR community, and much of that could be attributed to the histamine problem. Also, because of the tendency towards higher resting histamine, there's also a tendency towards something called histamine intolerance within the MTHFR community. Histamine intolerance shows up as food sensitivities in combination with a host of other issues. We will actually do a whole episode on histamine intolerance because it's a really complex issue and it's too much to condense here. But it can be treated with a low histamine diet that's absolutely life-changing for some people. Histamine intolerance or not, food sensitivity elimination is actually a crucial step on the MTHFR journey, and for many of us, it knocks a big chunk of symptoms out even before we've got our methylation balanced. For me, eliminating wheat and gluten, not about the folic acid additives, but just literally about the wheat and gluten, has been life-changing. Now, chemical sensitivities is another big chunk of this problem. Chemical sensitivities can be seen as kind of a combination of allergic issues related to high histamine and detox issues related to toxin buildup that can happen with MTHFR, because we have a hard time methylating things. The toxic buildup isn't just with toxins that need to be methylated, because as the system becomes overburdened and overloaded, all of the other detoxification pathways are slowed down as well. In general, a good MTHFR lifestyle limits chemical exposure to every degree possible, so that you can reduce the burden on your system. And the last big category is actually emotional sensitivity. To put a general disclaimer out there, this comes entirely from my own clinical observations and isn't a topic of research, although, to be fair, it also isn't the type of topic that is often researched anyway, because who would profit from it? So I have seen a clinical correlation between MTHFR mutations and emotional sensitivity, and I don't mean delicate flower not coping with real emotions sensitivity. I mean actual sensitivity to emotions in oneself and in others. I would call it a higher level of emotional awareness. In people on the autistic spectrum, this might mean feeling the emotions in the room as a physical sensation, or finding other people's emotions so distracting that they completely overwhelm that person's own internal state. In lesser forms, it might just be a heightened awareness of internal or external emotional states that can impact mood and also decision-making. This is a trait I see over and over again in my MTHFR community, and I find it to be such a double-edged sword. On one hand, higher awareness of emotions allows for greater empathy, greater emotional intelligence, and greater performance in relationships, both business and personal. On the other hand, it can come with the fallout of increased moodiness, greater tendency towards overwhelm, and a bigger need for buffer time between interactions with people or the outside world and your own personal space. It isn't something I have a solution for, outside of implementing more careful self-care as I've done in my life, but it is a situation I want to bring awareness to and get people talking about. I do think of this as a tremendous strength as much as it's a potential weakness, if we understand how to harness it. So the bottom line with MTHFR is that there are lots of sensitivities, but also there are lots of ways to mitigate these sensitivities. And that's something that, we have to strive for continuously. Some of it is avoidance, and some of it is actually coping strategies to reduce inflammation and reduce histamine. And we'll talk about that in future posts. Thanks so much for listening. And if you haven't done so already, check out tohealthwiththat.com. I am on the verge of actually starting an MTHFR community. Yay! I've been talking about it for a while, but implementation has been a little slower than I'd like. So I look forward to seeing you there, and have a great week.